What if the warning you ignored was the last one before destruction? That's the question that needs to resonate within you today, because there are times when God speaks in such subtle, silent ways that many don't realize it was a prophetic call to repentance before judgment arrives. Perhaps you've already felt that inexplicable tightness in your heart, that inner voice saying, "Don't go, don't do it, come back." Or even a dream so real it seemed more like a spiritual warning than a simple image in your mind. Have you ever experienced this? It's amazing how many people report premonitions, signs, little nudges of the soul that they only later realize were prophetic deliverances before destruction. And what you're about to discover may surprise you. Throughout history, the Bible shows us a God who never acts without warning. Before the flood, there was a warning. Before the fall of Nineveh, there was a warning. Before the destruction of Sodom, there was a warning. It's as if there's a recurring spiritual pattern. A call to repentance always precedes judgment. But in your daily life, in the real world, where everything is rushed, noisy, and fast-paced, how do you recognize when that call is knocking at your door? How many times have you felt something strange, an unusual unease, and only later realized that something bad might have happened? Stay with me until the end, because perhaps you too have experienced one of these warnings without realizing it. What's most striking is that when God speaks, it's not always with thunder, open visions, or extraordinary signs. Often, he speaks in silence, in discomfort, in intuition that arises from nothing and changes everything. People report avoiding accidents because something told them not to take that path. Others recount how a specific dream made them change important decisions, decisions that saved their lives, their families, or even their spiritual future. These testimonies of prophetic deliverance are not coincidence. They are proof that God continues to act, continues to call, continues to offer opportunities before something worse happens. And perhaps, as you listen to this, you are remembering a similar moment, something that made you stop, think, turn back, or give up on a step that would have been disastrous. Does this speak deeply to you? This is why this video exists. To reveal what many people don't know, don't realize, or ignore until it's too late. The prophetic call to repentance is not a threat, it's an act of love. It's God saying, there's still time, there's still a way out, there's still protection. And the more you understand this, the more you can discern when He is delivering you from something you haven't even seen. What you're going to hear here today may open your eyes in a way you've never experienced before, because there are spiritual patterns happening right now, at this very moment, and many can't see them. And as we delve into this profound and urgent topic, you will learn about real stories, situations that happen to ordinary people, but which reveal the hand of God acting before the fall, before the disaster, before the pain. Stories that show how He warns, how He watches over, how He protects, even when no one is watching. So prepare your heart, because what seemed like mere coincidence may, in fact, have been a sign. And what seemed like just a feeling may have been a direct warning from heaven. Now that you understand the importance of this calling and how these signs can appear in anyone's life, let's move on to something even deeper. And as you listen to all this, perhaps some memory is returning to your mind, some moment when you clearly felt that something greater was guiding you, protecting you, or calling you to a different path. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what touched you the most, because often one person's testimony becomes the answer another was waiting for. And I really want to know what you've already experienced, what you've already noticed, or even what you're beginning to understand now. When you comment, you're not just interacting with the video, You're helping to build a community of people who recognize God's signs and desire to grow spiritually together. And while you're doing that, take the opportunity to leave your like, not out of obligation, but because each like helps this message reach someone who might need exactly this prophetic warning today. It may seem like a simple, almost small gesture, but it has a huge impact on the expansion of this content. It's like shining a light where darkness still exists, allowing more people to discover that God still speaks, still delivers, and still calls before something worse happens. And if you feel that this type of reflection edifies you, inspires you, or awakens you spiritually, consider subscribing to the channel. This shows that you want to continue walking with us, receiving messages, studies, and testimonies that strengthen faith and reveal spiritual truths that often go unnoticed in everyday life. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And it is thanks to people like you that we can continue sharing these messages that are so necessary for this time. So, as we continue to delve into this profound and meaningful topic, hold dear everything you've heard so far, because what comes next will further deepen this spiritual journey we are building together. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because when we look at biblical history with a little more attention, we realize that there is a recurring pattern, like a kind of spiritual code, a silent map that reveals how God acts in times of danger, crisis, or change. This pattern doesn't appear only in isolated moments. It crosses generations, cultures, and different contexts, as if it were a constant reminder that heaven never allows destruction to arrive without first offering a way of escape. And the more we understand this, the more we begin to recognize that these calls to repentance are not just old stories, but living invitations to transformation, mindset, and decisions that change the course of our journey. It's like seeing behind the scenes of something that has always been there, but that many people have never noticed. When you think of Noah, for example, most people only remember the ark, the animals, and the flood. But the great hidden truth there is time. It didn't happen overnight. There was a warning. There was a calling. There was a period in which God allowed people to reflect, change their attitude, reconsider their choices. Noah wasn't just a wooden builder. He was a living sign walking through the midst of a distracted generation. Each hammer blow that resonated in that gigantic boat was, in fact, a message. There's still a chance, but nobody wanted to listen. It's fascinating to think about this, because sometimes in life we also ignore signs that seem too small to represent something so big. You know when something inside you insists, even if nobody else sees the point? Noah experienced that impact daily. Then comes Jonah, a reluctant, almost stubborn prophet, who didn't want to deliver the warning but had to obey. And when he finally did, the people of Nineveh understood the magnitude of the revelation they were receiving. They were humble enough to recognize the risk and change. And most incredibly, God changed their outcome. And here is one of the deepest truths of the Bible. Repentance doesn't just change the heart of the one who repents. It alters the future that was about to happen. This pattern is so strong that scholars, prophets, and spiritual leaders throughout the centuries confirm that God never executes judgment without first revealing, warning, and awakening. There is no destruction without prior warning. There is no fall without alert. This is part of divine nature, and it hasn't changed. And when you look at Jerusalem shortly before its destruction, you notice the same dynamic. Jesus wept before the city because he knew they were blind to the call, deaf to the signs. The message was before them, not in a dream, not in a feeling, but in person, and yet they refused to see. And this teaches us that the warning can be so close, so evident, so clear, that we only fail to perceive it because our minds are too occupied with the noise around us. How often does this happen to us? How often is the warning there, but the rush, the fear, the routine, or even overconfidence makes us ignore what should awaken us? And then there's Sodom, a city that had opportunity after opportunity but chose not to change. Before its destruction, there was a visit, there was a warning, there was conversation, there was intervention. Nothing there took anyone by surprise. The problem is that they didn't believe. And when someone doesn't believe the sign, they lose the chance to be protected by it. This is the most serious part of this biblical pattern. It's not just about the warning God sends, but about the human decision to listen or not listen. Often, deliverance is hidden in obedience to something that doesn't always make sense at the moment. When we understand all of this, we realize that these stories are not isolated accounts lost in the past, but a grand narrative connected to the present. God has not changed. He still speaks, still warns, still delivers, and still calls humanity to reevaluate its steps, to see the impact of its choices, and to recognize the signs that appear before great changes. And when you begin to accept this perspective, a new understanding opens up before you, almost as if you were seeing revelations that were previously hidden in the background of your own story. Perhaps you will even realize that certain situations you experienced were not coincidences, but warnings. Perhaps you will notice that sudden discomfort, that intense dream, that unexpected change in your plans carried more meaning than it seemed. And there's something powerful when we recognize these patterns, because it awakens a new spiritual mindset. We begin to understand that God is not distant, not indifferent, not silent. He is present, watching every detail, offering guidance in moments that could have ended completely differently. This changes how you look at your life, your decisions, your relationships, and even the challenges that seem too confusing. Suddenly, everything begins to gain depth. What seemed like just a passing discomfort reveals itself as a sign of care. What seemed like just a delay may have been protection. What seemed like just a dream may have been a warning. And when this awareness awakens, you begin to walk with more sensitivity, more attention, more wisdom. And as we explore this spiritual pattern that transcends time, it becomes impossible not to notice that these warnings are not intended only for specific people, but for anyone willing to listen. They appear in the most common situations, in the most unexpected contexts, at the times you least expect. And the more you learn to recognize these signs, the closer you get to an aligned, conscious, and protected life. It's as if you begin to truly see what has always been there, but in a clearer, deeper way, and more connected to God's purpose for your journey. If all of this is making you think about something you've already experienced, comment below. This makes sense to me, because this exchange of experiences helps to further illuminate the path for those who are following along in this reflection. And from here we continue delving even deeper into the next layers of this topic. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about warnings before destruction, many people imagine something grandiose, almost cinematic, as if God always needed to use thunder, signs in the sky, or extraordinary events to get someone's attention. But the hidden truth, the one that goes unnoticed by most, is that often the most important warning doesn't happen on the outside, but on the inside. It arises as a slight unease, a persistent thought, a discomfort that doesn't make sense, but also doesn't go away. And that's exactly where the mystery lies, because God, in His wisdom, knows that the human heart doesn't always respond to grand movements. Sometimes it responds to the subtle, the intimate, to that which stirs the mind even before altering the surrounding scenario. It's curious to observe how some people describe this. They say they felt something different, something they couldn't explain, but that made them change course, rethink a decision, postpone a meeting, or even avoid a specific place. And it's impressive how, later, looking behind the scenes of the situation, they discover that that strange feeling was, in fact, God's deliverance manifesting itself in such a discreet way that it almost went unnoticed. It's as if heaven were speaking through an internal language, silent, but full of impact. And when you start paying attention to these small movements, you realize that nothing is as random as it seemed. There are hidden revelations in details that many people ignore. This becomes even clearer when we think about dreams. How many times does a dream that seemed merely confusing or overly symbolic only gain meaning after something happens in real life? It's as if God is foreshadowing scenes, preparing the heart, informing about something that hasn't yet arrived, but is already in motion. And the most intriguing thing is that these dreams almost always carry a different atmosphere, as if they were denser, more vivid, more laden with meaning. They are the dreams you wake up remembering, even hours later, as if a part of you knew that it wasn't just a creation of the mind, but a spiritual message. And when you combine this with sensations, with intuitions, with small perceptions that arise in everyday life, you begin to realize that God works in both the visible and the invisible realms. And then there are those moments when the body responds before the mind. You know, when you feel a kind of emotional block, as if something is hindering your progress, even when everything seemed normal. Sometimes it's a peace that disappears out of nowhere. Sometimes it's a restlessness that arises for no reason. Sometimes it's something so subtle that you almost ignore it, but you feel it. And that's where many people don't realize how much of a sign this can be. It's not fear, it's not anxiety, it's not insecurity, it's spiritual discernment. It's as if the soul is capturing something that the eyes cannot yet see. And this type of perception is rarely wrong, because it doesn't arise from impulses or random thoughts. It arises from an internal movement that tries to protect you before something manifests externally. There's also the opposite, that unexpected peace that appears amidst chaos. Situations that should leave you desperate, but for some reason you feel calm, guided, almost strengthened. This too is a warning. It's not just emotional comfort, it's confirmation. It's God saying, I am here. Do not fear. Continue. And this peace also saves, also delivers, also guides. It prevents hasty decisions, calms inner storms, and prepares you to deal with challenges that, without this inner presence, would crush you. It's impressive how peace is as powerful a sign as it is a warning, because each points in a different direction, but both guide you to the right path. And while all this is happening, there's a deeper layer that few recognize: spiritual sensitivity. I'm not talking about something mystical or complicated, but a heightened, refined perception that grows the closer you get to God. It's as if the more you connect to purpose, the easier it becomes to identify when something is out of alignment. This sensitivity not only avoids problems, it also opens doors, guides decisions, strengthens your identity, and puts you in tune with what God is doing behind the scenes of your journey. It's a process of internal transformation that completely changes how you interpret every detail of your daily life. And that's precisely why many testimonies of prophetic deliverances begin simply. Not with visions, not with extraordinary manifestations, but with something small. Premonition, a feeling of unease, an inexplicable pause, a phrase someone said without realizing it, A delay that seemed irritating but made all the difference. It's incredible how God works in the details, as if He silently stitches together each event, guiding you away from danger even before the danger becomes visible. And when these stories come to light, when people finally understand what was behind those strange moments, everything makes sense. It's like looking at a blurry photo and suddenly seeing the clear image. These experiences are powerful because they change the way we interpret signs. They show that nothing is too small to carry meaning. They show that God speaks more than we imagine, but not always with the volume we expect. And when you recognize this, something changes within you. Your mindset expands, your attention increases, your sensitivity strengthens. You stop living on autopilot and begin to see hidden revelations in the daily flow of life. And that is exactly what opens the way for true testimonies, those that reveal how present God was when no one else saw. If this makes sense to you, right, I'm on this journey too, and we can continue from there, deepening this understanding even further. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we enter the realm of real testimonies, something changes within us. It's no longer just theory, no longer just biblical interpretation, nor a distant reflection on how God acts throughout history. It's life happening now. It's someone like you, like me, walking through an ordinary routine without imagining that they were about to face something that would change everything, until an inner voice, gentle, firm, and insistent, interrupts the normal course of the journey. It's impressive how, in these moments, divine intervention doesn't arrive with noise or spectacle, but with a simplicity that seems almost commonplace, almost everyday, until you realize the impact of what has just happened. And this first testimony always strikes me because it shows exactly that, how God continues to use discreet ways to protect, correct, and call someone back to a safe path before destruction manifests itself. The story begins with something very simple. A man leaving home for another normal day at work. Nothing different, nothing extraordinary. His head full of commitments, decisions, bills to pay, plans to resolve. He grabs his keys, closes the door, gets in his car, and continues on his way. It's a scene anyone can visualize, because we've all experienced this kind of seemingly ordinary morning. But there, on that specific morning, something began to stir within him. He recounts that, even in the first few minutes of driving, he felt a strange urge. A strong feeling that he needed to slow down. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anxiety, it wasn't a car ahead signaling danger. It was just that inner voice that seems to whisper something you can't explain, but that, at the same time, you can't ignore. He tried to continue normally, but the unease only increased. Something inside him was saying, "Stop, now." And the more he tried to rationalize, the stronger the urge became, as if it were an urgent message sent directly to his heart, bypassing logic. So, even without understanding, he obeyed. He pulled the car over to the side of the road. He took a deep breath. He looked around. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that justified it. He even thought he was exaggerating, that it was just accumulated fatigue, perhaps some kind of worry. But before he could start the car again, the sound of a deafening crash echoed a few meters ahead. Two vehicles collided with such violence that the scene seemed straight out of a movie. What's most striking is that, if he had continued at the speed he was going, he would have been exactly at the point of impact. There was no denying it. That impulse that seemed so small had just saved his life. And when he got out of the car to try to help, he felt something different. A mixture of gratitude, astonishment, and a profound awareness that it wasn't just luck. It wasn't just coincidence. It was guidance. It was a warning. It was pure deliverance. And the strongest part is that, when analyzing his own life after that episode, he realized it wasn't just about escaping the accident. It was a deeper calling. A calling to repentance, to return, to a change of mindset about things he had been ignoring for months. It was as if God had used that extreme moment to say, I am still talking to you. I am still taking care of you. And there is still time to adjust what needs to be adjusted. It's incredible how such a short episode can carry so many layers of meaning. Because on the surface, what happened was simple. Someone stopped the car and avoided an accident. But when you look behind the spiritual scenes, you realize that it was a direct, personalized, precise intervention. God didn't just deliver, He called. He called not only to prevent a physical tragedy, but to stop that person's life from continuing down other paths of destruction, bad choices, misaligned priorities, impulsive decisions, spiritual distances that gradually accumulate until something breaks. And that's precisely what makes these testimonies so powerful. They show that God doesn't wait for destruction to arrive before acting. He anticipates. He whispers. He warns. He interrupts paths, schedules, routines, thoughts. He moves situations to make room for revelations that can completely transform someone's journey. And when a person understands this, something profoundly changes. They begin to look at life with more attention, more sensitivity, more discernment. Their mindset changes. Their heart becomes more attentive to small signs. And that impulse that seemed like just a feeling becomes concrete evidence that God's care is real, present, and continuous. And perhaps, as you listen to this story, some memory will awaken within you as well. Perhaps a day when something made you stop, or change course, or postpone an appointment. Perhaps an unexplained discomfort that makes sense today. These moments, however small they may seem, carry a powerful hidden truth. God uses the subtle to prevent the devastating. He uses the simple to avoid the irreversible. He uses the invisible to divert us from the impact we were not prepared to face. And as we continue exploring these stories, it becomes clear how each one carries not only emotion, but purpose. Every detail reveals how much God is involved behind the scenes of our journey. And as we move on to the next testimonies, which are even more intense, deeper, and more transformative, comment below, "This makes sense to me," because this exchange helps to further illuminate this path we are building together. And it's curious how some of the strongest warnings God sends don't come in the form of thunder, nor signs written in the sky, nor extraordinary events. Often, they descend silently, intimately, almost domestically, as if the Spirit itself were whispering within someone what hasn't yet happened, but is about to be revealed. And that's exactly how it was in the second testimony, which is still recounted today with a mixture of reverence, impact, and that feeling that there are moments in life when heaven simply comes closer to earth. It all began with a dream, and it wasn't just any dream. It was one of those that seem more real than reality itself. A simple woman, mother of 3 children, recounts that in the early morning she saw herself walking down a narrow corridor, illuminated by a soft light, as if she were between the known and the unknown. At the end of this corridor, there was a half-open door, and behind it came a distant sound, something like wind, but a wind that carried urgency. When she pushed open the door, the scene suddenly changed. She was outside the house, looking at her own home as if she were an invisible observer, and around the house cracks appeared, opening up out of nowhere, as if something were about to collapse. In the dream, she heard a short but powerful phrase that echoed in her chest, as if it came from an inexplicable place. "Get out of here today." There were no further details, no explanation, no path laid out, just that phrase, which seemed more like a command from the spirit than a construct of the mind. She woke up with her heart racing, feeling that sense of alertness that is not to be confused with common anxiety. It was as if something had been deposited inside her, something that wasn't there before. And that's where the hidden truth is revealed. Sometimes, a dream is not just a dream. It is the most delicate and at the same time most powerful way for God to move someone. Without hesitation, she got up, told her husband, and, to her surprise, he didn't doubt her. He simply looked at her with that expression of someone who also sensed that something was out of place, something that couldn't be ignored. They gathered some clothes, called the children, and decided to spend the day at a relative's house, like making a simple decision, but one that carried a profound transformation in their mindset and the path the family would follow. The strange thing is that nothing in the environment seemed dangerous. Everything seemed normal, and perhaps that's why this kind of deliverance is so striking, because it happens before any physical sign exists. This is the kind of movement that only those sensitive to what God does behind the scenes understand. Hours after they left, while they were talking at the relative's house, a call brought confirmation of what the dream had been trying to warn them about. Part of their house's roof had collapsed. A compromised internal structure, something they would never have imagined. The accumulated weight, the leak that hadn't appeared, the perfect combination for a silent disaster that could have injured or even taken the lives of the entire family. When they heard this, they looked at each other with that silence that needs no words. It was a mixture of relief, fear, and gratitude. There was no denying it. God had given a sign before the fall. He had spoken softly, yet firmly, using something as simple as an image during sleep to move an entire family away from danger. And it is precisely in these moments that we realize that God's warnings are not about fear. They are about love. They are not about panic. They are about protection. And, above all, they are not about control but about opportunity to adjust decisions, to reassess paths, to change course before something bigger happens. The strongest part of this testimony is not just the physical deliverance. It's what happens afterward, inside the person. Because when someone goes through something like this, their mindset changes. The person begins to look at life with more awareness, more sensitivity, more perception of the spiritual impact around them. They understand that there is an invisible journey being waged at the same time as natural life happens. And this creates a profound sense of awakening, of spiritual responsibility, of awareness of how much God still speaks in the small things. The dream was not just a warning. It was a revelation that God was giving time, giving chances, calling people closer, reminding them that He guides those who choose to listen. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when you observe stories like this, you realize there's a recurring pattern. A pattern that connects completely different people, from different places, but who live spiritual experiences that point to the same reality. God never leaves someone in the dark before a decisive moment. He always lights a light before the turn, even if that light comes in the form of discomfort, an intuition, a sudden change of plans. And the most impressive thing is that, often, the person only understands the deliverance afterward. You only realize the magnitude of the mercy when you look back and see how much was saved. It's as if heaven gives a second chance before something that could have been irreparable. And this is precisely the perfect ground for what we're going to delve into next, because each testimony is not just an account of deliverance. It's a spiritual key, a sign of how God continues to move in the midst of humanity, calling for repentance before destruction manifests itself. Before we continue, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. And when we observe stories like this, of dreams that save lives and warnings that arrive before the fall, something becomes very clear. It's not just about the deliverance itself, but about what it reveals about the heart of God. He doesn't act as someone who simply points out flaws. He acts as someone who tries to prevent hurt. And it is precisely at this point that many people still don't understand the true meaning of repentance. Because repentance has never been about burden, accusation, or shame. On the contrary, repentance is protection. It's direction. It's the chance to turn the page before the page turns on its own. Repentance is God saying, I'm still giving time. I'm still speaking. I'm still calling. And perhaps that's why so many divine warnings seem subtle, almost discreet, as if he were respecting each person's process, but at the same time making it clear that there is a hidden truth asking to be perceived. And this truth, when it is finally revealed, changes the mindset of anyone who decides to listen. The most interesting thing is that the more you pay attention, the more you realize that God often warns you beforehand through small signs, small repetitions, small movements that seem like coincidences, but which carry a profound spiritual impact. There are people who say that, for several days, the same theme began to appear in different conversations. Others say they felt a restlessness that didn't make sense, a feeling that something inside them was being displaced, as if an invisible part was trying to point them in a direction. And there are those who noticed that the same word, the same verse, the same message began to appear in different places, in videos, in conversations, even at random times of the day. This is not chance. This is direction. This is a warning. This is God trying to align decisions before they become consequences. And yes, there are also dreams. Not ordinary dreams, filled with disconnected images, but those that come with clarity, intensity, and a kind of spiritual signature, as if they had crossed a border between the spiritual and the natural. When a person wakes up from these dreams, they don't wake up confused. They wake up alerted. They wake up with something throbbing inside their chest, as if they had received a message they cannot ignore. And this changes everything, because this perception doesn't stem from fear. It stems from revelations that, when understood, transform the entire journey. But perhaps the most common and most underestimated sign is inner unease. That silent discomfort that no one sees. That thought that keeps coming back. That feeling that you need to adjust something in your life, as if a part of you knows you're walking too fast toward a place you shouldn't be. And this kind of warning is so strong because it doesn't depend on external circumstances. It happens in secret, behind the scenes of the mind, in those hours when no one is around to interfere. It's God speaking directly to the spirit, like lighting a small light within someone who was already walking in the dark without realizing it. And when these signs begin to repeat themselves, when that discomfort returns more often than it should, when that message finds you again out of nowhere, it's because something is changing. And if it's changing, it's because God is calling. Calling not to punish, but to prevent something bigger from happening. Calling not to expose, but to protect. Calling so that decisions can be realigned, so that paths can be adjusted, so that the person doesn't fall into the same trap that so many others have fallen into. This creates a spiritual urgency that has nothing to do with despair. It has to do with awakening. It's not about fear of the future. It's about perception of the present. It's about understanding that when God speaks, it's because there is still time. But that time isn't always long. And this awareness completely changes how someone perceives the events around them. When you realize that signs exist, that anxieties don't arise from nowhere, and that repetitions carry messages, you also begin to perceive that spiritual life is much more dynamic than it seems. God is not distant, observing from afar. He is near, participating, intervening, guiding. He is precisely following each step, like someone observing an entire journey and, at crucial moments, pointing out the right route before the definitive detour. And this, in itself, should remind us how much He cares. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a point that connects